Russia's invasion of Ukraine tops the many challenges America faces as President Biden delivers his first State of the Union address. From inflation to COVID and democracy's future, the president's roadmap for the way forward at home and away on the Inside Story, State of the Union.
Hi, I'm Katherine Gibson, VOA's congressional correspondent. I'm on the rooftop of the VOA building overlooking the U.S. Capitol, where days ago Joe Biden delivered the president's State of the Union address. A speech that was altered multiple times as Russia's invasion cut deeper into Ukraine. Biden ran for office on the promise he would be better suited to handle multiple crises. Although the crisis in Ukraine took center stage in his speech, Biden did address his plans to tackle the price inflation, COVID, and the deep political divisions in the United States. Our White House Bureau Chief Patsy Witakaswara begins our coverage of the President's State of the Union speech.
Madam Speaker, the President of the United States.
President Joe Biden delivered his first State of the Union speech on Tuesday, his second address to a joint session of Congress following his speech in April. While the focus of State of the Union addresses is traditionally domestic, with Russian President Vladimir Putin placing his nuclear forces on a heightened alert following his order to invade Ukraine last week, Biden homed in on Putin's invasion within the first minute of his speech.
He thought the West and NATO wouldn't respond. He thought he could divide us at home, in this chamber, in this nation. He thought he could divide us in Europe as well. But Putin was wrong. We are ready.
First Lady Jill Biden invited Ukraine's Ambassador Oksana Markarova to join her viewing box, while lawmakers from both parties wore the yellow and blue of the Ukrainian flag as a sign of solidarity. Domestically, Biden's biggest challenge is pulling the country out of the pandemic. He highlighted vaccination success and signaled it's time for a new normal. Many lawmakers were maskless, following recently relaxed guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
I know some are talking about living with COVID-19, but tonight I say that we never will just accept living with COVID-19. We'll continue to combat the virus as we do other diseases.
But pandemic recovery has been hampered by rising inflation, now at 7.5%. Biden said his plan to increase the minimum wage and boost domestic production will help.
More infrastructure and innovation in America. More goods moving faster and cheaper in America. More jobs where you can earn a good living in America. Instead of relying on foreign supply chains, let's make it in America.
Delivering the Republican response, a governor best known for rejecting pandemic protocols such as vaccines and mask mandates. She attacked Biden's policies, accusing him of sending the country backwards. Iowa's Governor Kim Reynolds.
President Biden and his party have sent us back in time to the late 70s and early 80s, when runaway inflation was hammering families, a violent crime wave was crashing our cities, and the Soviet Army was trying to redraw the world map.
A compilation of 5 top polls shows Biden approval currently at only 41%. Better marks will depend on whether he can lead the country out of the pandemic, the Ukrainian crisis, and inflation.
Those realities are very important, but all that a president can do in a speech of this sort is show that you're strong, you're dedicated, and you're saying things that people want to hear, and that may help.
With Democrats holding a slim majority in both chambers, Biden struck an optimistic tone.
The State of the Union is strong because you, the American people, are strong.
Outlining a new unity agenda to address the opioid epidemic, resources for children's mental health, supporting veterans, and ending cancer.
I thought it was a pretty savvy way to put a frame over the whole package that would appeal to people across the aisle, but there were definitely certain moments that you could tell it was a partisan appeal as well.
Go get him!
Biden pushed for legislative goals still in limbo, including his social spending and climate plan, voting rights, gun control, and police reform, as well as new initiatives on mental health amid evidence that the pandemic has taken a toll on the nation's psyche. Patsy Witakaswara, VOA News, Washington.
Presidents usually prefer to talk about their domestic policy plans in a State of the Union address because Americans are usually the only audience listening. But with a war in Europe brewing, many around the world watched and listened to what the leader of the free world had to say about the situation. VOA Chief Diplomatic Correspondent Cindy Saine has more on Biden's words to the world and what they mean.
With Russian President Vladimir Putin ratcheting up attacks on Ukrainian cities such as Kharkiv and Kyiv, U.S. President Joe Biden stood in the House chamber and told Americans the free world is united against Putin's aggression.
The free world is holding him accountable, along with 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as countries like the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and many others. Even Switzerland are inflicting pain on Russia and supporting the people of Ukraine. Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been.
Biden said Putin badly miscalculated when he launched a full-scale invasion of his neighbor.
He thought he could divide us at home, in this chamber, in this nation. He thought he could divide us in Europe as well. But Putin was wrong. We are ready. We are united, and that's what we did.
Biden said it will take time, but the United States and its NATO allies will remain united, and freedom will prevail over tyranny. Biden did not discuss the chaotic departure from Afghanistan last August. But in the Republican response to Biden's address, Governor Kim Reynolds of Iowa blasted the president for what she called his failure there.
The disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal did more than cost American lives. It betrayed our allies and emboldened our enemies.
Experts said in light of the current crisis, it makes sense that Biden devoted his foreign policy part of the speech to Ukraine, even though much there remains uncertain.
So now it's a moment where I think Biden thus far has proved a lot of his experience and value, but it all depends on how things play out in the Ukraine.
Another expert told VOA the strong, positive, bipartisan response Biden received on his Ukraine remarks will be noticed in Moscow.
Foreign policy-wise, it's just a very important signal. Putin will be looking for any sign of division or vulnerability in American politics, and I think everybody in the room, not just Biden, but everybody in the room knew that this was not the moment to send that signal.
President Biden again made clear the United States will not send troops into Ukraine, but vowed that he and the other members of the NATO alliance will defend NATO territory. Cindy Saine, VOA News.
For most presidents, the State of the Union is an opportunity to lay out a domestic political agenda, especially in an election year like this one, when all of the House of Representatives and 1/3 of the Senate are facing voters. But with Russian tanks rolling towards Kyiv, Biden spent about 1/3 of the hour plus speech explaining what the U.S. and allies are doing to contain Russia.
Like many of you, I spent countless hours unifying our European allies. We shared with the world in advance what we knew Putin was planning and precisely how we would try to falsify and justify his aggression. We countered Russia's lies with the truth. And now that he's acted, the free world is holding him accountable, along with 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as countries like the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and many others. Even Switzerland are inflicting pain on Russia and supporting the people of Ukraine. Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been. Together, along with our allies, we are right now enforcing powerful economic sanctions. We're cutting off Russia's largest banks in the international financial system, preventing Russia's central bank from defending the Russian ruble, making Putin's $630 billion war fund worthless. We're choking Russia's access. We're choking Russia's access to technology that will sap its economic strength and weaken its military for years to come. Tonight, I say to the Russian oligarchs and the corrupt leaders who bilked billions of dollars off this violent regime, no more. The United States, I mean it. The United States Department of Justice is assembling a dedicated task force to go after the crimes of the Russian oligarchs. We're joining with European allies to find and seize their yachts, their luxury apartments, their private jets. We're coming for your ill-begotten gains. And tonight, I'm announcing that we will join our allies in closing off American airspace to all Russian flights, further isolating Russia and adding additional squeeze on their economy.
Joe Biden's words about the situation in Ukraine and other pressing issues is just half the story of the State of the Union address. Can he convince members of Congress from his own Democratic Party as well as his Republican Party opponents to back his policies? I had a chance to talk to several members of Congress right after Tuesday's speech to get their perspectives.
I mean, these people are in hell. This is never happened before. What's happening there, it's unbelievable. This is like killing, slaughtering people. I mean, I've never could imagine something. It's a genocide of a nation. It's not a war. It's not fighting with the army. It's killing people, destroying buildings and everything to the ground with illegal weapons. I mean, unbelievable. The leaders of this country need to have a backbone and have a stand, because it's not just the whole world community need to make a stand and tell him, it's insane. We want you to stop this insanity. This is wrong. This is bad for the whole world. But also it's important for us as a legislative branch, as Congress, to put pressure on our president that things are happening. We need to make sure that we have also humanitarian corridor, that these people get escape from this hell. I want to share the overwhelming support of United States Congress with all of the Ukrainian people. Everyone is so proud. Honestly, I could never imagine how proud I am. And every American, I got such overwhelming support from so many people and desire to do anything they can and show that they stand with the Ukrainian people for this fight for freedom, the fight against evil.
I think this president understands that Americans see themselves in the Ukrainian people. They see themselves from the point of view of our own narrative and our own story of fighting for freedom against a much more powerful oppressor. What I saw in the chamber, what I witnessed, was a unifying rally behind the president's call to impose these sanctions.
Well, I agree with one thing for sure that President Biden said tonight, and that is that tyranny will not overcome freedom, and that these folks are motivated by something more than just a central command unit out of Moscow. They are motivated by the deepest and most powerful passion, and it is for freedom and for opportunities and independence for their families. And they're not going to give up. And it's inspiring the entire world. And so I think that is the biggest takeaway for Americans who take for granted, all of us, the freedoms that we enjoy, and the threats that other democratic and free countries don't enjoy because of simply where they're located. But at this point, I think we have to make sure that the Ukrainians are armed to defend themselves. I mean, this was supposed to be over in 24 to 48 hours, and these freedom-loving people are fighting for their independence and fighting against tyranny. And it's inspiring for the entire world. But we've got to continue to keep the flow of arms and real lethal weaponry going along with other NATO countries. I don't think we need to bring troops to bear in Ukraine.
To the people of Ukraine, you're not alone. You have friends in the Congress of the United States of America, and I'm one of them. I believe that the actions that the president has taken in a measured way are already making a difference. The currency is falling. The economy is starting to turn even more down. And the people themselves are now learning that this is not what they thought it was. And I think that's going to make a difference. The president has said that he wants to make sure that Mr. Putin understands that this is his war. And as a result, he should suffer some of the punishment for what he has done. There was a greater amount of unity tonight than a good many people thought we'd have. And if there's one thing that we're coming together on, it is the notion that we must support Ukraine, because in so doing, we're actually supporting those who are on the front line of democracy.
According to the UN, more than 500,000 refugees have left Ukraine. Tens of thousands more trying to flee every day. VOA Russian service reporter Lisa Bakladas spoke with some of the women and children fleeing the Russian invasion. Anna Rice narrates her story.
4 days on the road. From Kiev to Zhytomyr, then to Rivne and on to the Polish border, joining the 100-kilometer line of cars and people with bags walking along the side of the road. That's what happened to Snezhana when she left Kiev on February 25th to travel to Germany, where she has relatives.
We had to move to a different border, the one with Slovakia. There is still a 6-kilometer line of cars there, but at least it's not 100 kilometers.
After kissing her husband goodbye, she gets on a bus and crosses the Slovakian border. He heads back to Kiev.
We were met at the border, then taken to a school where we could get warm, have a bite to eat and some water. Then friends of our relatives picked us up from there to take us somewhere where we could spend the night. And then we continued on our way to Germany.
On the second day of Russia's invasion, Olga also left Ukraine, together with her 1-year-old son Taras. Today they are safe in Poland.
I'm staying with my husband's sister now. We left Irpin, we heard the shelling and fighting in Hostomel. And literally 2 hours after we left, Russian tanks entered Irpin, Bucha and Worzel.
Katerina Ilchenko's husband is American. For weeks, he and the whole family had been trying to convince her to leave Ukraine.
I told them I'm not going anywhere. You know why? Because I have not finished renovating the apartment. I finished the kitchen but have not done our bedroom.
After the U.S. State Department strongly urged American citizens to leave Ukraine, Katerina partially gave in. The family left Kiev and headed to the west of the country a week before the Russian invasion. Now they are planning to leave the country.
We have not gone as far as we could have because I didn't want to leave Ukraine. But anyway, it's better than being at home because one of the first missile strikes hit our neighborhood.
More than 500,000 people like Katerina, Olga and Snezhana have fled Ukraine, according to the UN, and the number keeps growing. Even more Ukrainians are internally displaced, say experts.
660,000 displaced persons internationally, they are in other countries, and 1.5 million displaced within Ukraine. A total of 2.2 million, which is 4% of the population. That's significant already, and only after 5 days.
It's a refugee crisis in Europe happening in real time.
And without any sort of aerial protection, without any sort of engagement by either supporters of Ukraine or the Ukrainian military, having the capacity to deter those missiles from hitting targets, it may well be, I would argue, a worst case scenario where we may find that we only have 2 to 5 million refugees out of 44.1 million Ukrainians.
But those Ukrainians who spoke to VOA say they do not want refugee status. They plan to return home.
One of my biggest fears is to come back to Kyiv and not recognize it. From what I can see, and I try not to look much, little bits here and there, I can see what they have done to it. But I will love it in any state. I will come back to Kyiv. I will unlock the door to my apartment with my own key. I'll come in and I'll finish renovating our bedroom against all odds.
Felicia Bacalets in Washington, Anna Rice, VOA News.
Despite the harsh economic sanctions, Russia is getting hundreds of millions of dollars from Western nations for oil and gas imports. From Berlin, our Henry Ridgewell reports on Europe's quest for new energy supplies.
Russia's major banks have been sanctioned, its oligarchs targeted with asset freezes and travel bans. Russian planes have been banned from Europe's skies. But Russian gas and oil continues to flow into Europe uninterrupted, and Europe is paying hundreds of millions of dollars for it every day. EU ministers met in Brussels Monday to discuss how to break that dependency.
But every day we spend €350 million, which we give to the Russian system, to be able for them to invest in arms, which are dropping on the city of Kiev and elsewhere today. So yes, for climate reasons and for the security of our people, we need to rid ourselves of that dependency on fossil fuels.
But Russia supplies around a third of Europe's gas, and the latest figures show imports have actually increased since its invasion of Ukraine. The soaring price makes the trade even more profitable.
I think that the West is going to try to continue to hold back on sanctioning the oil and gas sector.
Germany is among the EU states most dependent on Russian energy. It has already announced the cancellation of the $11 billion Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia.
We have to think about the future. Germany will need more gas because domestic production is declining. We also need more gas-fired power plants, and we will also use more gas in the industrial sector in order to achieve the climate targets. And we have to answer the question, where will gas come from in the future?
Germany announced plans to build 2 liquefied natural gas, or LNG, terminals to diversify supply. Europe's LNG imports hit a record high in January, with nearly half coming from the United States. Germany has pledged to switch off its nuclear power stations by the end of this year and all coal-fired plants by 2030. The government said those decisions could be reversed following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The continent must speed up the change to renewable energy, says former Environment and Energy Secretary Rainer Barker.
There should be a very clear message to Russia now. We don't want your gas and we don't want your oil in the future. It's going to be painful because prices are probably going to be higher, but the only way to free ourselves from this dependency from fossil fuels is to put efficiency and renewables instead of the fossil energies.
Meanwhile, European energy giants, including Royal Dutch Shell and British Petroleum, have announced they are offloading their stakes in Russian oil firms worth billions of dollars. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, Berlin.
That's all the time we have for now. Stay up to date at voanews.com and connect with us at VOA News on Instagram and Facebook. I'm on Twitter at KGYP. That's KGYP. See you next week for the Inside Story.